This happened a few months ago over a bank holiday weekend. I know some of this might sound like I overreacted in places, but I just didn't know what to make of it from the beginning. So, for a bit of context, I'm in my late 20s and I live with my boyfriend Alan. We're both into the outdoors and we love to go hiking and camping and exploring. Last year, we finally bought a camper van. It was second hand, but it was in great shape. We only took it out once for a quick 2-night trip to the lakes, but I was already obsessed with it. We'd planned to go on a proper getaway for the long weekend. Nothing fancy, just somewhere green and quiet. But 2 days before we were meant to leave, Alan's work trip abroad got extended. He works contracts and sometimes flies out last minute. I was upset. But I had the time off, and after feeling annoyed for a bit, I figured, why not go on my own? I'd camped before, and I knew how to drive the van. It was just for a night or two, so why not? The spot I picked was about an hour and a half away. It wasn't very remote, but it was quiet. It was a small nature site with a lake and a wooded area, and there were designated pitches for camper vans. When I got there, the weather was perfect. There were a few other campers around, but it wasn't busy at all for a bank holiday. I found a great little spot. It had a lake view, and it was close to the trees. So I took some photos, messaged Alan, and posted a few things on my socials. Later on in the day, I strapped on my boots and went for a short hike. The day went by quickly, but by the time I got back, I was really tired. I noticed most of the other campers had packed up and left, and I thought that was odd because it was the bank holiday weekend. Why were they leaving so early? But I didn't think about it too much. I made some coffee, watched the sunset from the van, and settled in for the evening. Around 9 p.m, it was nearly pitch black out. I had the side door open for some fresh air, and I was reading my book wrapped in a blanket. It was peaceful until I caught the faint smell of cigarette smoke. I don't smoke, and I hadn't seen anyone nearby for hours, so I got up, stepped outside to check, but I didn't see anything. It was just woods, the lake, and me. I shrugged it off. I closed the door and locked it. I peeked through the curtain from inside the van. There was no sign of anyone. At around 11 p.m, I was flipping through the photos on my phone when I heard footsteps outside the van. They were slow and deliberate, but they were too heavy to be an animal. I switched off the interior light and looked through the curtain again. There was a man standing there, maybe 10 or 12 feet away. He wasn't moving. I couldn't see his face, but he was just standing there and it made my skin crawl. And then he slowly started to walk around the van. I watched him, silently, but lost sight of him as he went round one corner. And then it went silent. I held my breath, waiting, but nothing was happening. My phone beeped and lit up with a message from Alan and I nearly screamed. I was sure that whoever was outside the van would have heard it as well, but I stayed frozen for what felt like forever. And when I looked out the window again, he was gone. I texted Alan and I told him everything. A minute later, he called me. I felt better just hearing his voice. I felt less vulnerable for a moment, but he told me to check the window again, so I did. But again, there was no one there. He told me it was just probably someone passing by and to try not to worry, not to think the worst because I was on my own. And yes, it made sense. And he had so much more experience in solo camping than me. Apparently this type of encounter wasn't unusual. Eventually I managed to calm down. I double-checked all the locks, turned off the lights and got into bed. I barely slept that night. But by morning, everything just seemed normal again, and there was no sign that anyone had been anywhere near the van. The rest of the day went fine. I did a hike, took some more photos, and came back to the van by late afternoon. When I got back, I realised that no other new people had joined the campsite, and that I had the place to myself. So I made myself some dinner, set up my chair outside, and put some music on. I even ended up falling asleep. Not long after, I started to hear something again and it woke me up. I grit my teeth. Oh no, I thought to myself. That was the undeniable sound of rain hitting the leaves of the trees around me. I sat there hoping it would pass, but it didn't. Wishful thinking, I guess. So I packed all of my stuff, bundled it into the back of the van, unlocked the door, turned on all the lights inside. And that's when I noticed the car. There was a small hatchback parked across from me. I hadn't seen or heard it pull in, so I guessed it must have arrived while I was asleep. Through the rain, I could just make out a guy sitting inside the car. He had on a baseball cap and his face was lit up from his phone. He wasn't doing anything, he was just sat there. I didn't panic. It was a peaceful night and he was probably there for the same reason that I was. A few hours later, I was finally dozing off when I heard another sound, something very different this time. It was a scraping noise. Sounded like someone dragging their fingers across the outside of the van. And then, footsteps. Slow and shuffling footsteps. I got up and looked out of the front window. The guy in the hatchback was still sat there. He was still scrolling, motionless. Then he looked up straight at me. I jumped back and pulled the curtain closed. Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe there was just something going on in my head and I was imagining it. I got back into my bunk and lay there. The music was still playing low. And then I heard it. A click. And then another click. Then the hatch alarm went off in the back of my van. Someone was trying to get into the back. I bolted to the front, ripped the cover off the windshield and saw that the guy in the hatchback was still sitting there. Except now, he was looking straight up at me and began to honk his horn. That's when it started to sink in. He was a lookout for whoever was trying to get into my van. And now he'd seen me. He was trying to warn his friend. I slammed the keys into the ignition and hit the alarm by accident. I could see him gesturing, still sounding the horn and flashing his lights. I had 2 alarms going off now in the van, and I could barely concentrate. I managed to reverse, awkwardly spinning the van around, and started to tear through the dark. My headlights were bouncing as I passed the hatchback. I got out of the camping site and onto the main road. My heart was pounding in my throat. I managed to turn off the van alarm, but I didn't know how to turn off the damn hatch alarm. And when I looked in the rearview mirror, I could see the hatchback. He was following me. I was flooring it as best as I could. I was driving through the dark until I saw lights, finally a service station. I pulled into the lay-by next to it, thinking that the hatchback would leave, but he didn't. The guy parked up right behind me and got out. He was walking over. I locked the doors. He started to bang on the window. I ignored him, fumbling for my phone. "I'm calling the police," I shouted. "No," he was shouting back at me and continued to bang on the glass. "Listen, someone is in the back of your van," he said. I froze, turned to look at him. "That's what I've been trying to tell you. You need to get out," he said. I jumped out of the van, phone in my hand. It was the middle of the night when this stranger began to tell me about how he'd seen someone lurking around my van at the campsite. At first he thought it was someone I knew, but when the hatch alarm went off, he realised that something was wrong. He started honking, trying to scare the person off and warn me. I didn't know what to say or do. I turned to look at the van. I was in disbelief that someone else was in there. We called the police, and luckily they arrived quickly. And when they went to open the back of the van, there he was, a man, mid-40s, dressed in dirty clothes, smelling like cigarettes and alcohol. They pulled him out of the van, and he just stared at me and then began to smile. They found a knife in his waistband, and he didn't say a word. They believed that he'd been living rough in the woods, but he might have had some mental issues. He was probably watching the van and waiting to see if it was empty, or was going to break into it anyway, I don't know. The guy in the hatchback had been trying to help me the whole time, and if he hadn't have followed me, I might have driven all the way home with a stranger in the back of the van, and God knows what may have happened. Turned out the young guy's name was Luke. He'd just finished a late night shift at a nearby supermarket, and he decided to stop off at the site to relax for the evening, smoke, and unwind. He'd been watching a movie on his phone when he realised that the guy was hanging around the van. If I'd just gone to sleep again like I had the night before, and he hadn't have been there, I might not be here telling this story right now. When I got home, I called Alan and I told him all about it. One thing's for sure, I will not be going out in the van on my own. Not for a while.